Hi, welcome back to our stage. We hope you've enjoyed the sessions over the last, hour and a half or so. I really want to thank our speakers for all of the content that they prepared. We covered a lot of awesome topics: diversity, background screening, engaging our employees. So really, really important topics as we kind of move into hopefully opening up the economy. I get the pleasure of being on a panel today with our president, Mark Paljug. So we're going to talk about recruitment. We're going to talk about HR. We're going to talk about the top 10 best practices in hiring. We've conducted a lot of webinars on this topic. So we've got some amazing content that we're going to cover over the next 30 minutes or so. We do really encourage you, if you have any questions from an HR standpoint, a recruitment standpoint, to feel free to put them in the stage chat. We are more than happy to go along here and answer any questions. We want to make it interactive. We're going to go through our content, but again, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to kind of brainstorm and chat about any information that you would like based on our experience in recruiting and employment. Just to kind of give you a little bit of background, Mark is the president of TorontoJobs.ca, and my name is Rachel Mitchell. I'm the director of business development for TorontoJobs.ca. I have worked here for about 15 years, and Mark's obviously the founder of the business, I think a year before I started. So we've been working together for a long time. We have been in the employment industry for a long time. We've been through the recession. We have been through now a pandemic. We've got a lot of history here. We've seen a lot of impact, especially in the Toronto area, given that that's kind of our hub or our nature of where we do business and conduct business. So we hope that we can give you some awesome information today. We're going to, again, run through some tips and kind of have just a discussion about, what's missing in recruitment right now, or, different, how we see technology changing the landscape. So, Mark, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and say hi, and then we can kind of get into doing some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Hi, everybody. Mark Paljug, president of TorontoJobs.ca, as Rachel was just mentioning. I thought I saw everything before the pandemic hit, and then of course the pandemic hit, and all of the rules have changed, and people working from home. It's funny, actually, and Rachel, we've talked about this before, where before the pandemic, it was a bit of a discussion and challenges between managers and staff about working from home, and then boom, within a few days back last March 2020. It was like everybody was working from home, regardless of what your background was, regardless of what the challenges were before. So it's been quite an interesting last 15, 16 months for sure, not only on the recruiting front, but obviously on the HR front as well.
Absolutely. So we're going to kind of focus a little bit today on recruitment, just because that is what we do at TorontoJobs.ca. We do have recruitment services, full-time, part-time, and contract. And we also have a job board. So we obviously see a lot of organizations that are hiring, and we do a lot of consulting with those organizations. So we're going to kind of tailor this a little bit towards recruitment, and maybe, talk a little bit about technology and things like that as well. So Mark, you deal with a lot of clients, you deal with a lot of companies, you're very well regarded in the employment industry. How do you think the pandemic has disrupted recruitment? Like, maybe we can talk from a technology standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, recruiters in general, even before the pandemic, were using Skype and FaceTime, and really Zoom wasn't even on the radar until after the pandemic hit. But recruiters, for the most part, whether it was corporate recruiters or staffing agencies, were doing virtual interviews, video interviews, and so on. And then the pandemic changed all that in terms of really trying to reconfigure how you do recruitment and how you find people and how you do first interviews, second interviews. And it wasn't very long after the pandemic hit that the first placement I had ever done in my 26 years, where the person had never actually walked into an office. And since then, it's changed. I mean, obviously, a lot of companies are hiring without actually meeting someone, and trying to figure that out, and whether it's in the certain geographic area or outside of it. And so that really changed. I mean, the video side of it really changed in terms of hiring managers and the process and evaluating it. And I read something about Amazon being one of the first companies to really map out the whole recruiting process and kind of say, okay, how can we get people to just show up for work? And they mapped it all out to say, okay, we're going to use technology to hire all the way through. So literally people just show up for their shifts. They've already been interviewed. The process has already happened, and their systems and their technology has been set up to do that. So really, I would suggest that for any companies watching is really think about your process. What can be maybe automated? And I always think of the Russian robot Vera, who can do tens of thousands of interviews a day. And she's Russian, and she speaks 100 odd languages or whatever she speaks. And she can do interviews and record and process and so on and so forth. So really interesting, the changes that are taking place. And I think the companies that learn to adapt to that technology are the ones that are going to do well during this pandemic and after the pandemic as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology is that, like you mentioned at the beginning of the pandemic, things were getting to the point of doing some Skype interviews here and there. People were getting used to maybe the idea of doing a little bit more video. And then all of a sudden in March, it was like, you now have no choice. And here we go with, all the technology side of things. So that's really kind of changed the way things have been. So what do you think is missing in recruitment right now?
What do I think is missing?
Yeah, in terms of the process or the way people are recruiting.
I think, depending on the size of the business, I think they really got to think about their onboarding process. We deal with a lot of clients, and some have adapted to people working from home. Some people are really strict about saying, hey, look, you know what? We expect the person to be in the office, whether that makes business sense or it's just because that's the way we've always done. I think you have to really think about what that means, what that looks like, and what that may be. So what we're finding right now is there's about 5 million Canadians that are working from home out of a population of about 18 million people. So about a third is working completely from home, a third is working in an office, and a third is on some kind of hybrid model. Now, after the pandemic, the thought is that everybody's going to be coming back to the office, or at least a lot of employers are thinking that way. But companies like Shopify decided very quickly after the pandemic occurred that they were not going to have people come back to the office at all. And they basically said, you're working from home permanently, whether you liked it or didn't like it. And that was really on the forefront. That was really thinking ahead. And I mentioned about Amazon and really just kind of going, okay, you know what? You got to rethink your whole process. You got to think of onboarding and training, and what does it look like? And can you get people to come back to the office after this is passed? And there's all these cool and interesting HR issues, legal issues. Can you get somebody to take a COVID test? Can you force them to take a vaccine? Can you force them to show you that they have taken a vaccine? So all these issues are coming to the forefront now, and it's going to be interesting over the next few months how that's going to play out in terms of HR, onboarding, and recruiting too.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a lot of interesting stuff going on.
A lot. We have Vicky, who is backstage from, she's the Senior Manager of Recognition and Engagement for Bell Canada. So I'm going to let her come in and be part of the discussion. So just give me one sec here, and I'm going to share my screen with her. Hi, Vicky. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're just actually in the process of talking about recruiting and the pandemic, but maybe if you want to take a few minutes to just maybe introduce yourself and your organization just before we get into more questions and conversation, that would be great.
Sure. So I spent time in my career recruiting for new grad talent to Bell, to the organization, and so did that for several years. And right now I'm on the employee engagement side. So how do we engage with team members? How do we ensure that there's a positive experience? So employee experience plays a big role in that. And so I'm part of a greater team, and of course, talent acquisition and hiring talent into the organization is very important, and supporting that part of the portfolio with my colleagues. However, really primarily is looking at, okay, when employees do onboard and come into the organization, what does that mean, and how do we measure success? And I also support recognition. So I lead the recognition portfolio where employee experience all around is very important. So how do we measure that and make sure that employees are being recognized for great work done? So that's a little bit, but I have a great interest, and I know the topic's on, on recruiting, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. And I think we can all relate to what's happening today within all of the organizations that we work in.
Perfect. I think, engagement is one of those topics that's also extremely important right now. I talked a little bit about it in our opening remarks, but how do you engage and keep your employees engaged in the organization and the culture without being able to be in person? I mean, as we all know, that's where the greatest relationships are formed. So really challenging. And I'd like to maybe ask you a couple of questions just focused on engagement. I know we were kind of talking about recruitment, so I don't mean to shift around here, but I think engagement is just as important. So maybe you could share some tips with us, because I know a lot of HR people that are probably watching are, in the process, or they've come up with some tactics and things like that. I know you work for, one of the biggest companies in Canada, without, giving away any secrets or anything like that. What advice do you have for people that are watching that, maybe they could think about implementing, or just things that have worked for you in terms of engagement?
Yeah, and I think, and it's also work that we're also doing, right? I think we're all learning and the new way of working. And so I think future of work and what that means for all of us in terms of how we position ourselves, how we recruit, but then also how we engage with our employees is such an important time to kind of look and reflect on how we build that for the future and the strategies around that. So from an engagement standpoint, I mean, there's one thing to hire great talent to the organization, but it's really important that, at the even pre-onboarding stage, you make that a positive experience. So I know you talked a little bit about onboarding and how critical it is, and kind of reevaluating what that looks like. And I mean, we had to pivot very quickly in how we onboarded with the pandemic, but now we're at a stage where we're going to reassess everything. I think we did a really great job in terms of ensuring we had the right technology to bring folks in and make sure that, they can learn on what Bell is able to provide in terms of an experience, but then also make sure that they're well supported in their journey at Bell. And so what we've done is, reassess kind of the technology. What are we using? How does that work? Is there ways that we can make it even better? And then just looking at onboarding. If you can't onboard in the same manner, being in office, let's say as an example, for the first day, how do you do that in a virtual environment? Ensure they have all the key things to help them be successful. And everything from just, we offer so many great things. You have your employee benefits, and there's so many things. And sometimes it's just learning what that, entails. But how do you do that in a virtual environment? And how do you make that a consistent experience for everyone involved? So, we did that with our grad teams. And, when you look at our early talent and coming in, at once, and then looking at it from all of our employees joining the organization that are all joining at different times, right? And so how do you kind of bring some structure around that? And so we're just looking, we're still learning, and we're still kind of trying to define what that can look like and make it even better. And so I think this is kind of the journey we're all on, is defining the future of work and how that relates back to how we hire, how we onboard, and then also how we engage with our team members in the future.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And my next kind of point was going to be on onboarding. So I'm glad you brought it up because it is tough, from a management perspective, not meeting the person that you're going to be, that's going to be reporting to you, or to learn their style of how they like to be managed, or, again, that face-to-face, reading them from that perspective. It's difficult on, online. So, how do you measure that? So in terms of onboarding engagement, how are you measuring those things?
Yeah, so surveying is important. I mean, to get that feedback. So we do have onboarding surveys that we send out to gather feedback within the first 90 days. So that's also really important to us. And then, in terms of we have an annual team survey that we conduct, and that's also very important in terms of gathering information based on tenure, and then identifying kind of where it is that, maybe we have opportunities, and if we do have opportunities. So, I mean, I think it's constant assessment. I don't think you can just kind of do a one snapshot in time. It's what other things are you going to continue to measure? And we're also learning on, what is it that we can do from a listening strategy? So it is continuous listening, because your annual survey at one point in time may not give us enough throughout the year. And especially with the changes that are continuously happening within the next few months, especially, right? And so as we transition, and I know there's a lot of talk around, yes, and I heard a Shopify, let's say as an example, everyone's working from home, but then there could be people that are going back to office. And so how do you measure that for some of those team members? And what is that experience like for each of those groups who may be working from home full time versus those who may be going in office sometime? And so is that experience different? So it's going to be very interesting, but surveying is very important to us to, ensure that we're listening to our employees and then, building actions against, how we can make improvements.
Yeah, no, that's great. Mark, maybe we can touch on a little bit because we've done some hiring over the pandemic. We've been fortunate. We've had to shift a little bit in terms of our services and kind of pivot, and our new offerings, and doing these virtual events was one of them. So maybe you could give some, insight into how we onboard, and, what are the important things when dealing with onboarding and engagement at our organization as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's been hard, to convey the culture when you're not there. I mean, when you have an office before the pandemic, you have an office, people walk in, there's a sign on the person's computer, and birthday celebrations and things like that, and now all of a sudden that is all blank. It's all everybody's on even ground. In fact, it actually makes for better for recruiting. Because, what difference is it a smaller company, larger company, or whatever, because now you're just comparing to what the actual job is. So, for us, for onboarding, it's really trying to do everyday daily meetings, maybe mixing it up with phone calls, not just emails, or not just video, because video, people's eyes start getting a little bit wonky and all that. So mixing it up between phone and video. And also just, having shared documents. I find that has been really helpful to have, here's our workbook, here's our list of things that we need to do. Whereas before the pandemic, it was just like, okay, well, what's on your list? What's on my list? And there was no real, kind of shared side of it. So I found that to be really effective, because you can pick up where you left off with that person. And that's your playbook, or that's your in the development world, the sandbox. You've got your sandbox that you're playing and doodling and sharing ideas, and but it's tough. I mean, I personally find that it's much more efficient. You turn on your computer, you're there, the meeting starts, and you're ready to go. But you definitely lose the culture, and how do you communicate that, even if it's 5 or 6 people on a call, like how what's that person really like? And it's funny because we've hired people, and I meet them in person at some point, maybe picking up a computer or whatever, and it's always like, wow, you're a lot taller than I thought you were, or whatever, right? And it's kind of funny that way, because we're all just in a box now, so it's kind of hard to tell us. But yeah,
and I agree with you. Like, I think it's just that natural ability to get a pulse on how someone's doing just by walking the office or walking around and kind of getting to see and learn from others. But I think, and I miss the signs too, for sure, like the actual computer signs, like you would actually put up. I think we're always great. But yeah, no, I think it's just it's a different way to get a pulse, and you have to get to know your team members in a way that, makes sense, because there are some folks that may express themselves in a different in a different way if they're talking via audio versus video. It's from a comfort perspective too. And so having that variety is really, really important. I think one of the things we had to innovate and come up with creative solutions. And thankfully we did introduce a recognition solution that brought the company together to recognize team members. And so we had a decentralized model that now is centralized. So we have one platform for everyone across the organization. And we did bring celebration cards into the mix. So your traditional birthday cards that you would write down and give to someone, now we have these celebration cards within the platform. And so it's a nice way to kind of celebrate and make sure that we're not missing special occasions. And so it's been a great way to connect, because I think that's what we're missing, is the ability to connect in the same way we did when in person. And I mean, when we look at our organization being national too, I mean, we always did have individuals that worked on our teams that weren't in the same office. So it's also been important to acknowledge that we've always had sometimes an issue in the way we connected, even with team members across the country. And so now it's just kind of coming back and saying, okay, well, now we can connect via video. It's just a way of working that's easy. So I think we've kind of learned also, and I guess have become more aware of maybe where our opportunities were even before this all kind of started.
Yeah, we have a client who, and they brought this up on a similar kind of panel. And what they do is, and now it's a small company, so it's a little bit harder for a company Vicky size perhaps. But he goes out and for everybody's birthday, he brings them something, and literally drives to their house. But it's less than I don't know, 5, like 6, 7 employees or something like that. So it's a little bit easier to manage or whatever. But that's adapting through the pandemic and changes. So I don't know, have you had other situations like that things you were doing before, Vicky, and that are different today?
Yeah, I mean, the ability to just give someone a gift and do that. So I know there's been some team members that are dropping off at the doorstep saying, here, surprise, this is something the team did for you, and put it together for some big milestones, especially. But yeah, like I think it's just I think what we're missing is just the ability to kind of say hello on the day-to-day, walking into the office, just taking a walk and being able to go from meeting to meeting instead of like just kind of being in one place all day in front of the screen. It's a very, very different way that everyone's still, like, I think that ability to connect, but I think everyone's valuing this. So, I mean, as much as it's been difficult, it's also been very much appreciated by team members that they do get to spend time with their family right after they turn off for the day, right, and go and have dinner without the commute. So there's been a nice balance, but I definitely think that not losing sight of kind of where we want to head to is that ability to connect is still very important to people. And we're seeing that just through some survey results where individuals are saying, I still want to be able to connect, but maybe not in the same way we did, right, where we were in the office for 5 days a week. For some team members, right? So, I definitely, for me personally, I can say I do miss the connections. Just being able to say hello and say good morning to people when we're walking into the office together, and just now it does require much more effort to make sure that you're not forgetting to connect with certain people. That if you're not in a meeting with them day to day or working on the same project, you're still taking the time to reach out. And not losing sight of that either.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe for the next, 5 to 6 minutes that we're on the panel, we can kind of switch gears because we're getting a lot of reopening, a lot of vaccinations happening. So maybe we could talk about maybe a little bit about strategy as to, are we working in a hybrid model? Are we going back to the office? Mark, I know in our organization, we have been extremely productive. You kind of touched on it. We have created this library of Google documents where it's eliminated. I was just saying to one of my team members, we have eliminated so many emails just by having these shared documents where we can kind of communicate through them. Someone inserts a question that we're going to talk about in our meeting, but they answered the question, and that eliminates an email. And we've got, where's this document, but everything's just stored in. And I feel like I log in earlier, for work as well, just because I'm not doing that 45-minute to hour commute every day. So I feel like I've been more productive. I know we've done some surveys and the data has shown that, it's 47. What was the percentage? It was 47% more people feel they're 47% more productive working from home and not being in the office. So have you, Vicky, have you implemented kind of a return to office plan? Do you have a tentative plan? And what does that look like for your organization?
Yeah, so I think from a productivity perspective, we've seen folks are, like team members are productive, which is great, right? And so, and when we look at what we're going to do in terms of our model, I mean, there will be some folks that may want to come to the office. There's other folks, like we do have people that are working in stores, there's our technicians in field. So there's some roles that require you to be obviously not having the ability to work remotely. However, there's going to be there's going to be some team members that may decide to work from home permanently, or there's some team members that may come to office a few days of the week. So there's probably going to be a mixed model, and so we're working towards all of that in the coming months, to kind of, and so that's all being defined right now in terms of where we're going. But I think it's a different way of working, and I mean, from a productivity standpoint, we've seen that our team members are productive also working from home.
What's really, I was just going to say that, what's ironic about all this is that back when the pandemic hit last March, it was almost like, school's out, right? Everybody's going home and, it's going to be great and it's going to be a lot of fun and we're going to be able to watch TV and do whatever. And then kind of reality set in that, hey, maybe, we should be fearful of this whole thing, number one. And number two is, I can't keep doing this day in, day out. Like, I got work to do. I got obligations. I got responsibilities. And, that mindset changed from, okay, well, reality is setting in and now I got to get work. And what's my structure? What's my day looking like? And it's interesting. And each person is so different, right? Some people can run like all day, doing stuff, and others need a lot of breaks. And, we're not designed to be looking in front of a computer for, hours and hours at a time. So a lot of changes, right? A lot of change over the last 16 months.
You have to remind yourself to take those steps because if there's a lot less steps you're doing when you're in front of a video, video calls all day, right? So those times just to go for a walk and make sure that you're taking care of yourself. So, that focus on well-being is, it's critical, right? Because you're kind of owning that too, is that you have to take more time. That natural just walking from, meeting to meeting doesn't happen. So, yeah. So, I'm counting my steps and I'm making sure that I'm like, okay, so how many steps have I done today after working, after a few hours, right? So it's important.
Perfect. And we only have a few minutes left, but I kind of want to leave on a positive note. So Mark, maybe we could start with you. What is your, we have an audience of people working in an HR role or a recruiting role. What would be your biggest piece of advice for, it could be anything. It could be on engagement. It could be on recruitment, kind of moving into the second half of 2021.
Well, I think people don't realize, a lot of companies don't realize how tight the market is to find good people. And the biggest hook that we used to have as recruiters before the pandemic was finding somebody a job that was closer to home. Well, a lot of people, that doesn't make any difference anymore because you can't get closer to home than working from home.
Right.
So I think you got to be creative in how you attract candidates and what might sell them. And money, in many cases, doesn't even attract people either because they can't spend the money that they're saving. The people are saving, I think I read the average person is saving 13% versus they were saving 1.5% or whatever it was before the pandemic. So if you're saving, you can't spend any money. So what are you going to do with more money, kind of thing? So you got to be creative. You got to be creative, and you got to think outside the box to try to find people to join your company and give yourself lots of time to recruit because it's a different kind of market than it was a year ago.
Definitely. And Vicky, maybe just for our last question, you could answer the same question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a different way of looking at how we recruit and how you attract talent and being flexible, considering there's so many more options. So you could work anywhere for the most part. There's so many organizations that are offering that now. So you have to make sure that, and I think everyone kind of feels the pressure on ensuring that they can secure talent. And, when you look at talent shortages and certain skill sets that you're looking for and filling specific roles, it's very interesting to kind of see where the market is right now and how we continue to evolve. And I think when it comes to your employer value proposition and how you position yourself as an organization, it becomes even more important. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how things go in terms of all organizations and where they position themselves in the coming months. And so I look forward to kind of seeing how things evolve over time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for all the advice. And we really, really appreciate you being here, Vicky, and Mark as well. I just wanted to do a few kind of wrap up items before we do sign off. I firstly do want to thank, again, Vicky, Mark, and all of our speakers today. I know it takes a lot to put together the content. All of our speakers were fantastic in the content that they delivered. So thanks so much to all of them for being there. And thanks to all of our attendees for being here as well. Again, this event was presented by TorontoJobs.ca and EventLogic.ca. So it's EventLogic with a K. We do a lot of virtual event hosting. So if you need assistance with that, it's a sister company we developed at the beginning of the pandemic. TorontoJobs.ca. On that side of things, we offer recruitment services, so full-time, part-time, and contract. And we also have our job board and resume database. We've been around for about 16 years, so we've got a really large pool of talent on our site and a lot of experience on our recruiting team. If you are interested, we have a lot of upcoming events. I mentioned at the beginning of the conference, we have our employment law conference taking place on Friday. We have some amazing employment lawyers that are going to be part of speaking sessions and discussions just around. Obviously, there's a lot of things happening in the employment law sector, so we're gonna talk about that. July 20th, we have another HR conference, so very similar to this, just with a different set and series of speakers. On September 8th, we have our recruiters conference, so a conference dedicated just to talent acquisition and recruiting. And on September 10th, we have our staffing firm owners conference. So those are all of our HR recruiting conferences. And then we also have some hiring events coming up as well, which we have exhibiting and sponsorship opportunities. So we have June 29th, our general career fair. So we have IBM and Metrolink, just to name a couple. So that'll be a virtual career fair. On August 11th, we have our TO Tech career fair, so specific to technology roles. August 18th, we have our bilingual career fair. And August 25th, we have our student career fair. So if you want any information on attending or exhibiting at those, that can be found on eventlogic.ca for more information. We are very active on social media. We do have recruiters, TorontoJobs.ca kind of recruiters pages, as well as our TorontoJobs.ca groups. So you can go on there. You can keep updated with all of our upcoming events. We post articles, content. We're very active on our blog. And I just, again, want to say thanks to everyone for being here. We will keep the networking area open for the next 15 minutes. So if you want to continue networking on the platform, you can definitely do that on the left-hand side. There is a networking button there. And again, thanks so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. And we hope to see you at our next event.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.